Welcome to Family History Mysteries, a podcast that tells the stories uncovered through family history research, the unexpected stories of everyday people. I am an avid family historian who has been compiling my family tree for over 15 years, with nearly 20,000 people recorded in my trees. Episode 19, Joseph Lucas. Joseph Lucas was born on the 14th of August 1805 in Southam, Warwickshire, England, to Martin Lucas, who was a silk weaver, and Elizabeth Dyer. Joseph was also a weaver, and he married Elizabeth Scott on the 13th of June 1824 at the Holy Trinity Church at Coventry, Warwickshire, England, when he was 20. Elizabeth was also 20. They had 4 children, 2 that survived infancy. In 1826, he was charged for stealing at Coventry and was jailed for 3 months for stealing a decanter. On the 26th of March 1831, he was sentenced to life at the Warwick Assizes, Coventry, for larceny. And I'm just going to read the report that details what had occurred. His crime: there were 4 indictments: stealing on the 22nd of January last, a box containing drugs valued at £6, the property of Thomas Caberville; assisting Thomas Worrell in carrying away on the 22nd of January last a saddle valued at 10 shillings, the property of William Haywood; assisting Thomas Worrell on the 22nd of January last in taking a cloak, property of James Mills; stealing on 22nd of January last a pair of boots, value £1, the property of William Jackson. The initial sentence was transportation for life, and the jailer's report said character bad, been convicted before. And in the Coventry Herald, dated Friday the 28th of January 1831, it states, robberies. On Saturday evening, a cart belonging to one of the Bedworth carriers was robbed in Mr. Dalton's yard, Bishop Street, in this city, of a box containing upwards of £7 worth of medicine. The carrier had been absent from the cart but a few moments, when on his return he found that the box had been stolen. He immediately gave information to Gardner, the watch-house keeper, who instantly proceeded to the lodgings of 2 suspicious characters, named Thomas Worrell and Joseph Lucas, who reside in Wells Street, and on examination of the house found the box concealed under a bed. Having secured Worrell and Lucas, he further examined the place and found a pair of top boots which have been identified by Mr. Jackson. Since the above, Gardner has succeeded in tracing to the prisoners the robbery of a saddle from Mr. Haywood of Derby Lane, £35 of bacon from another person, a great cloak which was stolen last week from Mr. Miles of the White Lion. The prisoners will be brought before the magistrates on Monday and are likely to be committed on 5 different indictments. 2 pigs supposed to have been stolen were also on the premises, but the owners are not yet known. At the time of his sentencing, he had a son, William, who was not quite 2 years old, and a daughter, Harriet, who was actually only 4 days old. Joseph was sent to the prison Hulk York after his trial, and this was moored in the Portsmouth harbour. On the 19th of May 1831, there was a request for clemency. There was a letter written from the inhabitants of the city of Coventry requesting mitigation of the sentence of Joseph, as he had left 2 small children and aged parents behind, and he was of good character. There was a further letter from tradesmen of Coventry stating that Joseph had completed his apprenticeship as a boy. His parents were respectable and of good character, almost heartbroken with 2 bereaved children, and a plea for mitigation. And a letter from Martin Lucas, so Joseph's father, at Coventry. Sir, we address you with humble confidence by your openness and candour in your sentiments. We have every reason to believe you will esteem it a pleasure to do what you can for our distress in the interest in behalf of the prisoner named Joseph Lucas. We have so kindly promised to do all in his power for him as the prisoner is about to set sail. Your timely interference is humbly solicited on behalf of a distressed family in great trouble, with great anxiety wanting the result of your kindness, Mr. Ellis, as a petition from the inhabitants and the freemen of Coventry on his behalf. By your favours you confer an obligation of many of the freemen of Coventry, signed Martin Lucas. And the response to the plea for clemency states, "To our trusty and well-beloved, the keeper of the convict jail, and all others whom it may concern. By His Majesty's command, Melbourne, Whitehall, on the 17th of May, 1831. Sir, Viscount Melbourne, having had under further consideration the case of Joseph Lucas, a convict under sentence of transportation, in whose behalf you interested yourself, I am directed to inform you that his lordship perceived no circumstances that would justify him, consistently with his public duty, in recommending the prisoner to His Majesty for a mitigation of his sentence." So in other words, his clemency was denied. He left England on the 31st of May 1831, leaving his wife Elizabeth with 2 very small children. He left on the ship William Glenn Anderson. The voyage took 152 days via the Cape of Good Hope. His description in convict papers reads 5 foot 3.5 inches, tall, a labourer, and he could read and write. Joseph arrived in Van Diemen's Land on the 1st of November 1831, and a summary of his conduct sheet reads, 13th of October 1834, absent without leave and returning home drunk. On the 18th of January 1837, drunk. 7th of February 1837, absent from his master's residence and drunk. He received 25 lashes. The 4th of March 1837, drunkenness, 36 lashes. And then on the 18th of July 1838, drunkenness and misconduct, drinking with a ticket of leave woman, another 36 lashes. Joseph had a second attempt at clemency. What's interesting when you read his conduct sheet, though, the date that I'm about to show you is virtually at his second last offence. So by this stage he had been drunk, he'd also left his master's residence, and he had received lashes. So it's interesting when I read the information how differently it looks when he's hoping for clemency of his sentence and to return home to England. Is dated the 25th of May 1837. The grounds for clemency was that he was led astray by bad company, he was of previous good character, distress of elderly parents, his family left without support, there was no violence when the offence was committed, and he has had good conduct since transported and so might be soon eligible for ticket of leave. There was a letter from J.R. Salmon, the District Assistant Surgeon from Perth Van Diemen's Land, to Mrs. Elizabeth Lucas, stating that Joseph had been an assigned servant to him for the last 12 months. Mr. Salmon confirmed Joseph had conducted himself satisfactorily, and his continued good conduct should help to obtain a place as a footman or house servant, therefore improving his lot. Mr. Salmon hoped to make application for some remission in his sentence, but warned it would be a lengthy process. He explained Joseph's situation would improve once he obtained his ticket of leave, and finished by saying, "I shall be happy at all times to afford you any information about him you may wish." Again, this clemency must have been denied, as on the 27th of May 1840, Joseph obtained his ticket of leave, and on the 26th of August 1841 he married Mary Rumble in Perth, Tasmania. Joseph by this stage was 38 and Mary was 30. So a little bit about Mary Rumble. Mary Rumble was born on the 25th of May 1812 at Welney in Norfolk, England, the daughter of Samuel Rumble and Sarah Riddle, and she was born 2 years before her parents married. Mary Rumble married Spinks King in 1836 at Norfolk in England, and only 10 months later Spinks died. On the 4th of July 1937 in Norfolk, England, Mary was charged with stealing ribbon at Swaffham, as well as her father that day. She was listed as a farm servant, a widow, and with one child. Now, I don't know what happened to the child. I don't know if that child was Spinks's child or someone else's child. But as you can see in a moment, this child didn't stay with her grandmother. Interestingly, Sarah Rumble, her mother, was also tried and convicted with her. So to fill you in on Mary's mother, Sarah Rumble, before her marriage she was known as Sarah Kibble, was given a 14-year transportation sentence the same day as her daughter on the 4th of July 1837, and she sailed on the John Renwick in 1838. She had 4 other daughters, and her daughters at the time of her conviction were 21, 16, 15 and 12. Sarah sailed out and arrived in New South Wales, which was a different destination to her daughter, and was assigned at the Parramatta Female Factory. The Parramatta Female Factory was Australia's first purpose-built institution for convict women, and all unassigned convict women were sent there when they were transferred, and it was commissioned by Governor Macquarie in 1816, and it was designed to house 300 women. When Sarah landed, she was assigned to Henry Harvey of Field of Mars as a cook, and she was 27 at the time of the documentation in March 1843. She was sentenced for disobedience in November 1843 at the Parramatta Female Factory and received 10-day solitary confinement. On the 1st of March 1847, she was given a ticket of leave, and she was allowed to remain in the district of Berrima in New South Wales. Her ticket of leave information states, Sarah Rumble, on the ship John Renwick, Norfolk, dairymaid, 5 foot and a quarter inch tall, sallow and freckled complexion, light brown hair, hazel eyes, lost a canine tooth, left side lower jaw. Sarah died on the 1st of August 1871 at the Goulburn Hospital in Goulburn, New South Wales, at the age of 74. And it is very telling on her death certificate that she didn't have contact with her family once she was transported. It has the details of the cause of death, but under her parents' names it's unknown. The informant was the superintendent of the Goulburn Hospital. It does say that she was born in England and she has been in Australia for 35 years, but there's no information with children of the marriage, a place of marriage, or to whom she had married. There was also an article in the Goulburn Evening Penny Post on the 25th of July 1871 that states, surgical operation at the Goulburn Hospital. A woman named Sarah Rumble, aged 75 years, underwent amputation of the leg on Tuesday at the Goulburn Hospital. Previous to her reception into the hospital, the old woman lived in a small tenement in town, and having no relatives, was entirely dependent upon the neighbours for any little act of kindness of which she stood in need, and is supposed that during some of the severe frosts in the early part of the winter, her foot was exposed and became what is popularly known as frostbitten, whereupon mortification ensued to such an extent as to necessitate amputation as the only means of saving or prolonging her life. The operation was performed by Dr. Morton, assisted by Dr. Haley. The patient is much better than can be reasonably expected at such an advanced age. And 1 week later, unfortunately, Sarah had passed away. What happened to Mary's father? As I mentioned, he was convicted as well on the same day as his wife Sarah and his daughter Mary. Samuel Rumble was also convicted at Swaffham on the 11th of July 1837. He was 52 at the time of his conviction for stealing stolen goods, and he received 14 years transportation. His record stated he could not read nor write, and his character was bad, and it also stated that his wife was transported at the same sessional hearing. He requested clemency on the grounds of being separated from his family at his advanced age. He was penitent, and it was his first crime. He was 9 years older than his wife Sarah, and he received a pardon on the 25th of November 1843 after spending time in the prison hulk since he was sentenced. Samuel lived with his grandson Charles, his wife and his granddaughter Lydia, as was mentioned in the census of 1851, and he died in 1869 at Northwold, Norfolk, England, at the age of 82. So getting back to Mary Rumble, as you're aware, her mother was sentenced at the same time as her and her father on the same day, and Mary received 7 years transportation. She departed London on the 30th of September 1837. She had suffered from cholera in jail on the 20th of September 1837 and was hospitalised for 4 days. So she wouldn't have been really well before she departed on the Athwick, which was a female transportation ship. She arrived in Hobart on the 24th of January 1838 and was placed with Mr. Simeon Lord at St Paul's Place in Hobart. So her mother was transported to Sydney and she was transported to Van Diemen's Land, quite possibly because they were convicted for the same crime, so were with each other in that crime, and quite likely the English decided, well, they can be transported and be in two very separate places. And she gave birth to a daughter, Maria Williams, on the 30th of January 1839. Maria's birth certificate states that her father was James Williams, a convict. The place of birth was the female factory at Launceston, and Maria was baptised on the 5th of February 1839. At this point, I'm unable to find any further information on this first child born in Tasmania to Mary, and I'm also unable to locate the exact James Williams convict that it's referring to on the birth certificate. Mary was listed in service at Morven, Tasmania, which is south of Launceston, in April 1839. Mary and William Wright, a convict who came out on the ship Isabella, requested permission to marry on the 13th of April 1840. But then Mary requested permission to marry Joseph Lucas only 1 month later. This was refused, and in her conduct sheet, on around that time, 2 months after that time, on the 26th of June 1840, it stated that she had disorderly conduct and as a result was in solitary confinement with bread and water for 10 days. It records that in July 1840 she was at the superintendent's office in Launceston, and in March 1841 she was at the office at Campbelltown. Mary and Joseph requested again to marry on the 12th of April 1841. It was again refused, and then finally on the 7th of July 1841 it was approved, and they married on the 26th of August 1841 in Perth, Tasmania. Joseph at this stage was 36 and Mary was 27. Meanwhile, in England, Elizabeth Scott applied for and received an annulment of her marriage from Joseph Lucas because her husband had been transported. After 7 years of separation, the wife that was left behind could apply for an annulment, which is what she did. She married Edward Lynch on the 29th of October 1839 at the Holy Trinity Church at Coventry in Warwickshire. Joseph Lucas and Elizabeth Scott's 2 children were 10 and 8 at the time that Elizabeth remarried. Mary got her ticket of leave 2 years after Joseph in April 1842 and received her certificate of freedom in July 1844. Joseph was recommended for his pardon on the 17th of January 1844. It was approved in March 1845, and he was listed as a farm servant and a gardener living at Longford, just south of Launceston. Between July 1848 and March 1849, the family moved to Port Fairy in Victoria. Mary died aged only 40 at Port Fairy on the 4th of May 1853. Joseph went on to marry Mary Seary on the 15th of June 1858 at the Roman Catholic Church at Port Fairy. Mary was Irish and was 13 years younger than Joseph at the time of their marriage. Joseph died at Port Fairy on the 23rd of December 1871 aged 68. Joseph and Mary had 7 children together. The first child was John Henry Lucas, and he was born in Launceston in February 1842, and he married Bridget Healy in 1863 at Macarthur in Victoria. He was a bootmaker. He married again after Bridget's death in 1907, and he died aged 74 in December 1915. The second-born child was Joseph, who was born on the 6th of February 1843 at Perth in Tasmania. He married Agnes Irving on the 4th of September 1863 at Woolsthorpe in Victoria, near Warrnambool, and they had 10 children. Joseph was a stock rider at Woolsthorpe, and he became later a butcher. He died in October 1906 at Woodford, Victoria, aged 63. 2 of Joseph Jr.'s children married into the Jenkins line. Selina married Lindsay John Jenkins, which featured in episode 16, The Scots. And Emma Elizabeth married Robert Daly Parkinson, who was the son of Jane Daly and Henry Parkinson, who featured in the Mailer's Flat episode 17. Hannah, the third-born child of Joseph Lucas and Mary Rumble, was born on the 8th of August 1844 in Perth, Tasmania. She married John Martin Snell in Warrnambool in 1862, aged 17. John was 8 years older than Hannah. They had 6 children and lived at Winslow, another small township near Warrnambool, and Hannah died at Winslow on the 3rd of November 1910, aged 66. Alfred, the fourth child, was born in 1846 at Longford in Tasmania. He married Alison Ray at Woodford in Victoria in March 1867. They had 6 children. Alfred died aged only 33 when their youngest child was 1. The next child, Henry, was born in 1847 at Longford in Tasmania. He married Mary Ann Richardson in March 1869 at Woolsthorpe in Victoria. He had 11 children with Mary. Mary died in 1888 when their youngest child was only 1, and Henry went on to marry Mary Moncrief Booth, who's Robert Mailer's granddaughter from episode 17, Mailer's Flat, in 1896 when he was 48, and Henry died at Purnham, which is another small township near Woodford and Woolsthorpe, in April 1919, aged 72. Emma, the next child, was the firstborn child in Victoria in the family at Port Fairy in March 1849. She married Henry Candy at the Wesleyan Parsonage in Warrnambool on the 18th of October 1866 when she was 17. Henry was 23. They had a daughter, Mary, but Henry died only 4 years into their marriage, aged only 27. Emma then went on to marry John Thomas Meek in June 1871, 12 months after the death of Henry, and they had a daughter, Julia. Emma died on the 29th of December 1872 at Macarthur in Victoria, aged only 23, and her daughter was only 9 months old. John Meek emigrated to New Zealand with his young daughter, and he remarried over there in 1883. The next child, William, was born on the 1st of November 1850 at Port Fairy in Victoria. He was known as Willie. He died only at the age of 15 at the Merry Creek near Warrnambool. He drowned when struggling with the canoe that he was paddling. And I'm going to read you an article outlining the coroner's investigation into his death. Fatal accident. On Sunday afternoon last, a lame lad, aged about 18, named William Lucas, was accidentally drowned on the Merry near Cassidy's Punt. An inquest was held on the body yesterday at the Olive Branch Hotel before Dr. Harringham and a jury of 12. From the evidence of a boy named F.W. Manning, it appears that he and the deceased were crossing the river in a canoe when the wind was very strong and the canoe took in some water and began to slack quite close to the shore. Manning could swim and tried all he could to save Lucas, but it was of no use. Assistance was obtained from Mr. Cassidy's and from town, but too late to be of avail. The police found the body about 2 yards from the bank of the river, and the jury returned a verdict of accidentally drowned. I'm just going to read from the coroner inquest deposition files that cover the incident in a lot more detail. So the first statement is from Frederick William Manning, so the young boy that was with William or Willie, and it says, Frederick William Manning of Mary River, taken on oath on the 10th of September 1886 at Warrnambool. I knew William Lucas, the deceased. I have known him for 3 years. I saw him yesterday about 2 p.m. He pulled up on the river from the punt in a canoe by himself. He called for me to go across the river with him. I went with him. The canoe got into the shore, but we could not get out, and it was too shallow and muddy. The wind blew the canoe back into the river again. When his broadside was to the wind, the water came flapping up on the side. The canoe was taking in water, partly on account of his getting frightened and shaking the canoe. He then tried to throw the oar on shore. When the water was coming in, he jumped out. The canoe was going down with me, and I swam ashore. I do not think he could swim. I saw him splashing in the water. Once he nearly reached the reeds. I had about 4 yards to swim, and I saw him going down. I have seen the body shown to the jury. It is the same as that of William Lucas. I have been out with him before in that canoe, and he seemed to manage it well. When I saw that he was drowning, I ran to W. Cassidy's to say so, about a quarter of a mile's distance. I returned with Mr. Cassidy as quickly as possible, but could see nothing of the body. I saw John Cochrane on the opposite side of the river. I called out to him. He was going to swim across, but did not. Before he could get across, the deceased was drowned. The next statement is from John Cochrane. I knew William Lucas deceased by sight. I was walking along the bank of the Mary River yesterday between 2 and 3 o'clock. I saw 2 boys crossing the river in a small boat. I did not see that they were in any danger. I continued walking along. I soon heard a scream from the boat. I looked around and I saw a boy in the water, plunging about and in danger of being drowned. The other boy was just getting up out of the river at that time. I stripped off my clothes to swim across to make an effort to save him. By the time I had stripped off my clothes, he had disappeared. I thought that he might have been able to reach the shore, being so near it. I am not a good swimmer and do not think I could have swum across yesterday, as the river was very rough. While I was there, W. Cassidy came down and asked me to assist him in getting across the punt. I did so. When deceased was drowned, there was no other person within hearing. And then Dennis Boyle, the constable, said, yesterday at about 3 o'clock I received information of a man being drowned in the Mary. I proceeded to the river with a dray. I dragged the river for about a quarter of an hour and found the body about 2 yards from the bank. I took the body out of the water and conveyed it to Warrnambool and reported the circumstances to the coroner. The next statement's from William Cassidy. The deceased William Lucas was in my service. Yesterday at 2:30, my servant girl cried out that Willie was in the river. I ran to the river and saw something, but his hat was floating in the water. The distance I had to go was about a quarter of a mile. He had been in a canoe in company with another boy. They were going shooting. The water was deep, 8 or 10 feet at the banks, which was very steep. When I saw no signs of the body, I came into town and reported to the police. I returned immediately with a policeman. We grappled for the body and we found it in 8 feet of water. He was not more than a quarter of an hour searching for it. We had the body conveyed into town. The deceased has been in my service for 4 months. He had been in the canoe before and he said he could swim. So tragic for the family, considering William was the youngest child of the Lucas family. So from petty theft in England to convicts, permissions to marry, appeals for clemency, and then settling in Victoria, There are certainly many, many descendants of this line of the Lucas family. So I hope you enjoyed the story of Joseph Lucas. If you are interested in sharing your story on my podcast, Family History Mysteries, please go to my Facebook page and send me a message. If you would like some assistance in filling in the gaps in your family tree to see what mysteries you solve, please get in touch. And don't forget, you can have early access to episodes by subscribing, and you'll also gain access to bonus episodes